Free will is a controversial topic. In my review of Robert Sapolsky's book, Determined, link in the comments, I say, in an extended defense of atheism, he likens other people's reports of consciousness and free will to belief in religion. In other words, for him, consciousness and free will partake of the supernatural. Could he be serious? For me, there's nothing more down to earth and in your face than being conscious. It's more real to me than my right hand. My review drew the following comment, simply reinforcing Sapolsky's point. Quote, "It's only religious people who are motivated to establish that free will exists because their religion tells them it does. It's always amazing to see how bad someone's argument can be when they are needing to argue for something that makes no sense." End of quote. That comment defies my assertion that for me there is nothing more down to earth and in your face than consciousness. It's more real to me than my right hand. In the face of such irreconcilable opposition, how can we make sense of this? It's generally agreed that whether or not free will exists can't be proved or disproved. Anything we do can be interpreted either way, as due to us having free will or to deterministic laws of physics. Does this matter? In my experience, people don't care much either way. But can it make a difference? In the everyday, maybe not so much. But later in life, you may look back and ask, did I really know myself? Did I understand what life was about? Did I choose between options wisely? Then dualism may make more sense, and you may wish you'd pay more attention to it earlier in life, like now. So I think it's worth making a case for dualism, maybe even as dualists, our duty. First challenge is, why do some people deny free will so vehemently? I tackle this in detail in my article in this channel, Evo-Dualism, New Challenge to Physicalism, link in the comments. Basically, I suggest physicalists do not experience conscious thinking as dualists do. For confirmation, check out the survey I'm running in Community in this channel, direct link in the comments, where respondents report close to 50-50 experiencing or not experiencing their own conscious thinking processes. For people who don't experience their own thinking processes, free will is going to appear just an illusion, and they seem to do fine without it. So I see my duty as a dualist not to argue against physicalism, but to address the uncommitted. I aim to do that by coming up with an explanation for free will. Explaining something isn't proving it, it's simply making it easier to understand. Let's start with paying attention. For me, free will comes along as part of consciousness. Most of the time, consciousness involves noticing things, hearing them, seeing them. Sometimes my attention is driven by something outside of me. A loud noise makes me turn my head to see what caused it. But mostly, I feel I'm free to direct my attention deliberately wherever I choose. This is how I experience free will most directly. This isn't supernatural. While I'm doing this, just choosing to look from one thing to another, my body responds physically. Muscles around the lenses in my eyes tighten and relax to bring whatever I'm choosing to look at into focus. So this shifting of my attention isn't supernatural. It's registered by muscles in my eyes. Now, thinking. Along with seeing and hearing things, I'm conscious of thinking. Generally, I have thoughts one at a time, each thought leading to another, and so on, forming trains of thoughts. Quite commonly, the thoughts seem to generate themselves. I don't have to make them, but I can experience starting a train of thought. That's another way I experience having free will. Generally, thinking doesn't seem physical. Conscious thoughts don't have any physical properties like weight or location or conservation. And what connects one thought to another doesn't seem to involve anything physical either. They seem to obey a logic of their own. I've come to think of them as evolving into one another. That's just the only plausible alternative to them being physical I can imagine. Now, action. Sometimes I experience trains of thought ending in decisions, and commonly I then notice I do something physically to execute that decision. That action follows my arriving at the decision. By willing it, I'm making something physical happen. Physicalists can point you to experiments where something changed in a person's brain before they made a decision, suggesting decisions arise in a person's brain before they made the decision, suggesting decisions arise first in our brain, only afterwards do we become aware of them. But these were simple no-go decisions. I'm talking about trains of thought that take several minutes with the action coming after them. No way physical actions could have preceded the origin of such a train of thought. So we dualists experience arriving at our decisions consciously. They originate in consciousness. Finally, creativity. Nothing purely physical can be creative. All purely physical events come from prior physical events acted on by deterministic physical processes. No novelty possible there. Yet I can, while thinking consciously, make things, paintings and drawings, for example, that are physical, but are novel. And from my experience, I can make them only while I am conscious. More examples of real creativity? New kinds of bridges getting built, all originating in the minds of bridge designers. Conscious creativity made physically real. What else can us experiencing consciousness tell us about reality? Where does consciousness come from? In us, it evolved, or at least the mental abilities we've used to make ourselves conscious. So since it can equip us to become conscious and creative, we know evolution can transact in some ways in terms of consciousness and creativity. Does that mean evolutionary processes can be creative? Here we come to a major parting of the ways. If you don't experience consciousness and free will, and if you think new kinds of living creatures can evolve by purely physical processes, as physicalists claim, then you're on the physicalist path. But if living creatures evolving from single-celled microbes into elephants and giraffes looks creative to you, then you can continue with us on the dualist path. Personally, I can't imagine anything more creative than that. If that isn't creative, I don't know what the word means. Claiming evolution is creative, is that making it supernatural? No. For evolution to detect it in the first place, consciousness must come associated with physical properties, else evolution couldn't detect it. And if consciousness didn't come with physical properties, it couldn't have evolved further to eventually appear as developed in as consciousness is in us. So, here are fundamental principles in my version of dualism. First, matter comes with two kinds of processes: physical processes and evolutionary processes. They're entirely different kinds of processes, but because they're both processes of matter, they can interact. Physical processes can act to change our mental experiences, and our mental experiences can act to change physical matter. The interactions can go both ways. In this respect, dualism is more reasonable than physicalism. And a second principle, evolution's freedom from physical determinism is enough for entirely new kinds of living creatures to have evolved. Our free will is like that. It's the same kind of freedom. We can't do what's physically impossible, like fly by flapping our arms, but within our physical limits, we're free to think and apply our powers creatively, as free as evolution is. To claim I have free will can be creative, I have to claim evolution can be creative. Whatever limits there are to evolution's creativity will limit how free our free will is, but we're far from bumping into those limits. In effect, within the limits of what's physically possible, we have free will. But beware, my dualist explanation has some forbidding implications. If chains of thought can lead to decisions that lead to physical consequences, then thoughts are real too. And if thoughts are real, so are the meanings they consist of. And then aren't numbers real too? All qualia are real because they can be involved in thoughts that lead to actions. All these, it seems to me, must be real for minds able to support free will. And if evolution is creative, what is the creative agent involved? I'm driven by the logic of absence of other causes to suppose it's the genome. The genomes evolved first to become intelligent, conscious, and creative. They can then create creatures like us that are intelligent, conscious, and creative. Am I just replacing physical determinism with genetic determinism? No, because the genome in essence itself has free will that it then passes on to us. Compare a human to a boulder. The boulder doesn't have free will. The human does, because the human genome does. It makes us free, as it is itself. Our genes don't determine us, they equip us to be free. Am I forced by my explanation for dualism into believing everything in the world is conscious to some degree, that is, panpsychism? No. I think matter manifests consciousness only under certain conditions. In life on Earth, for example, but not on the Moon or Mars. There, physical determinism reigns. Does having an explanation for free will like this, with these implications, make us worse off? No, because physicalism is also just an explanation. You can only prove we don't have free will if you limit yourself to physicalist assumptions. And physicalism too has forbidding implications. It denies physicalists any behaviors that can't be accounted for in purely physical terms, such as creativity. It involves them in implausibility, such as causation can go from the physical to the mental, but not from the mental to the physical. And it blinds them to the evidence of our senses that evolution has been creative. Simply as explanations, dualism and physicalism can't be proved true, but it might be possible to come up with rational support for dualism. For example, it might be possible to study living creatures' trains of thought, assess how long they are, and see if they've lengthened as evolution progressed. This would validate the reality of consciousness as something that can evolve. From all I've said, it follows that neither physicalism nor dualism can suit everyone. So neither should be presented as our official account for human nature. So I'm upset that in schools, children are taught the physicalist account of how we evolved, that we evolved through purely physical processes, the combination of genetic mutation and natural selection. The obvious implication is anything made by purely physical processes will also be purely physical. I would like that to stop. Once we've come up with a thoroughgoing theory of evolution from a dualist point of view, perhaps they could be offered both. As for the physicalist smear that advocating for mind is a resort to the supernatural, I suggest replying, yes, for you it must seem so. However, for people outside STEM departments in universities, free will is real and must be taken into account. In a vote, physicalists would lose.